Sometimes the most devastating betrayals come wrapped in polite apologies, delivered by strangers to your doorstep on the day you need your family most. What I discovered that Christmas changed everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the family I'd spent decades nurturing. Here's what really happened when my world fell apart, and how I rebuilt it stronger than before. My husband David had been gone since March. 74 years of life, cut short by lungs that couldn't keep up with his generous heart. The doctors said he went peacefully, but there's nothing peaceful about returning to an empty house after 5 decades of shared mornings, shared meals, shared silence that meant everything. The quiet that followed his absence wasn't peace, it was an aching void that seemed to grow larger with each passing day. As Christmas approached, I made a decision. This year, I wouldn't sit alone in that silence. I'd create something beautiful, something warm, something that might fill the hollow spaces grief had carved out. I planned a simple gathering, just my son Robert and his wife Jessica. Nothing elaborate, just family around a table, sharing a meal and maybe finding some comfort together in our first holiday without David. I threw myself into the preparations with an energy I hadn't felt in months. 2 full days of cooking. Not the half-hearted reheating of convenience foods, but real cooking. I crafted David's famous cornbread stuffing from memory, each ingredient measured with the same care he'd shown. The ham was glazed to perfection with brown sugar, and crowned with pineapple rings that caramelized beautifully. I whipped the mashed potatoes exactly the way Robert loved them as a child, with real butter, and just enough sour cream to make them cloud soft. There was fresh pecan pie, sweet dinner rolls that filled the house with their yeasty warmth, and a green bean casserole that took 3 attempts before I got it just right. I even baked a batch of sugar cookies, knowing full well that Jessica would pretend she didn't eat sweets while secretly reaching for seconds when she thought no one was watching. For the first time since David's funeral, the house smelled like a home instead of just a place where I happened to sleep. I bought a real Christmas tree, not one of those artificial things from the department store, but a fresh-cut fir that cost nearly $100. David would have grumbled about the expense, but his eyes always sparkled when he saw those lights twinkling in the evening. I hung every ornament with deliberate care, our wedding photo in its tiny red frame, the misshapen macaroni star Robert made in 2nd grade, the glass cardinal we'd glued back together in 1992 after it shattered on the hardwood floor. I wore the red dress David always said made me look beautiful, the one with the pearl buttons down the front that I hadn't worn in years. I fixed my hair the way he liked it and even put on lipstick. The good china came out, the set we'd saved for special occasions that somehow never seemed special enough. This felt special enough. Dinner was set for 3 o'clock. By noon the table was perfect, every fork in its place, every napkin folded just so. The food was ready by 1, warming gently in the oven while I lit candles and put on Bing Crosby. The house looked like something from a holiday magazine, and for the first time since March, I felt proud of something I'd created. At 2:30, I sent Robert a simple text. "See you soon." No response came. 3 o'clock arrived, and I positioned myself by the front window, watching for their car. 3:15 passed. 3:30. The food began to cool despite my efforts to keep it warm. I turned down the music and checked my phone obsessively. Maybe traffic was heavy. Maybe Jessica had trouble getting ready. These were the lies I told myself as the minutes stretched into an hour. At 3:45, the doorbell finally rang. My heart leaped as I smoothed my dress and hurried to answer. But when I opened the door, it wasn't my family standing there. A young man in a delivery uniform held out a manila envelope with my name printed across the front. He mumbled something about a delivery, handed it over, and walked away without another word. Standing on my porch in the bitter cold, I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a note in Jessica's neat handwriting. "Margaret, we're so sorry. We decided to spend Christmas at my mother's house this year. It was a last-minute change. We hope you understand. Love, Jessica." No phone call. No explanation beyond those few clinical sentences. No suggestion of rescheduling or making it up to me. Just a note delivered by a stranger while I stood in my red dress, surrounded by the perfect Christmas dinner no one would eat. I remained in my kitchen, candles still flickering, food still warm, Table still set for 3 people who would never come. I poured myself a glass of sweet tea and sat at the head of the table, staring across at the 2 empty place settings. My throat felt so tight I couldn't swallow. All that preparation, all that hope, all that love put into every dish, none of it mattered now. The house felt cold again despite the warmth from the oven. I extinguished the candles one by one, packed the untouched food into containers, and slid them into the refrigerator. Everything except the pecan pie, which I left sitting on the counter like a monument to my foolishness. That evening, I made the mistake of checking Facebook. There it was, a photo posted by Jessica's mother. Her dining room table surrounded by laughing faces, wine glasses raised in toasts, plates scattered with the remnants of a feast. Robert sat beside Jessica, their fingers intertwined, both of them beaming at the camera. They looked happy. They looked like they belonged exactly where they were. I didn't comment or react to the photo. I just stared at the screen and felt something shift inside me, something that had been slowly changing for years, but that I'd refused to acknowledge. This wasn't absent-mindedness or poor planning. This was a choice, a deliberate decision to exclude me from their lives. That night, sleep eluded me completely. I sat in the living room with only the Christmas tree lights for company, occupying David's old chair for the first time since he'd passed. I used to complain about how he'd fall asleep in that chair after dinner, snoring through the Hallmark movies I loved. Now I would have given anything to hear that familiar sound one more time. I thought about Christmases when Robert was small, when David would string lights on the porch while I baked cookies in the kitchen. Robert would race around in his dinosaur pajamas, more excited about the wrapping paper than the toys inside. David insisted on reading The Night Before Christmas by the fireplace every Christmas Eve, holding the book with one hand while pulling Robert onto his lap with the other. That chair had belonged to David, but on Christmas Eve it always fit both of them perfectly. Those were our traditions. Christmas morning breakfast with eggs and sausage and cinnamon rolls. David sneaking a slice of pie before lunch, thinking I didn't notice. Long evenings on the couch, tired but content, watching the same old movies we'd seen dozens of times before. But after Robert married Jessica, everything began to change. The first year they were married, they spent Christmas with her parents. I understood newlyweds needed to create their own traditions. We'd celebrate the week after, I told myself. Then the second year came and it was the same story. And the third. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that they were just finding their footing as a couple. Gradually, I realized I was becoming their backup plan. When they did visit, it was always rushed. They couldn't stay long because of traffic, because they had other commitments, because Jessica needed to be somewhere else. She never helped in the kitchen, preferring to sit with her phone while I cooked. Robert would hover nearby, but his attention was always divided, always waiting for her signal that it was time to leave. Last year they arrived 2 hours late, already full from eating at her mother's house. They picked at their food, complimented everything politely, and left before dessert. I kept hoping that if I just made everything perfect enough, warm enough, familiar enough, they'd remember what we used to have. But this year proved that hope was misplaced. The morning after Christmas, I woke before dawn and stepped outside into the frigid air. David used to say that walking in the yard first thing in the morning helped him think clearly. I never understood it then, but now I do. I wandered past the raised garden beds we'd tended together, past the weathered bench that needed refinishing, and stopped at the bird feeder hanging from the old maple tree. That's when I saw it, an envelope wedged behind the feeder, dusty and weather-beaten but still sealed. My name was written across the front in David's familiar handwriting, that slightly shaky cursive I'd loved for 50 years. The corner was stamped with a date from 11 months ago, just 1 week before he died. Back inside, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the envelope for several long minutes before finding the courage to open it. The message was brief. If you're reading this, something has happened. Go to my desk top drawer. There's more. That was all. No greeting, no explanation, just instructions written in his steady hand. I went directly to his study, where his desk remained exactly as he'd left it. Pens lined up in perfect rows, calculator beside a legal pad covered with his neat figures. I opened the top drawer and found another envelope taped to the inside panel. This one thick and sealed with a paper clip holding a small gold key. Inside was a folded note and an official-looking document. The note was vintage David, practical and direct. "Margaret, if Robert ever shuts you out, this will make sense. You'll find everything you need at the place this key opens. It's yours. Always was. You just didn't know it." The document was a deed with my name on it, for property in Hendersonville about 45 minutes from our house in Asheville. I'd never heard David mention any other property. I pulled out my phone and searched for the address, finding a small cottage on a quiet mountain road. David had known this would happen. Not the specific details of Christmas dinner perhaps, but something like it. He'd seen what I'd been too loyal, too hopeful to acknowledge, that Robert was pulling away, that Jessica was driving that distance, that I was slowly being written out of their story. I drove to Hendersonville the next morning, following winding roads through Winter Bear Mountains until I found the gravel driveway that led to a white farmhouse with blue shutters and a stone porch. The key slid into the lock as if it had been waiting for me. Inside, the air was warm, as if someone had been there recently maintaining the heat. Everything was clean and carefully arranged. The furniture looked familiar, pieces David had refinished over the years, items from our home I thought we'd gotten rid of. There was the lamp with the small stain on its shade, the quilt that used to cover our guest bed, the bookshelf arranged exactly the way David organized his volumes back home. On the mantel above the fireplace sat framed photographs, one of David and me at the beach, another from our 35th anniversary, and one I'd never seen before of David sitting on this very porch with a cup of coffee. A note on the coffee table read simply, "This is yours in case they ever forget who you are. David." The kitchen was fully stocked with canned goods, pasta and staples, nothing expired. The pantry held everything necessary for simple meals. There was even a grocery list taped inside one of the cabinets, written in his handwriting: coffee, bread, eggs, sugar. He'd planned for both of us to be here, had created a complete backup life without telling me. I walked through the bedrooms, finding one furnished with a quilt and lamp, another containing boxes marked Margaret's things. I didn't open them that day, I wasn't ready. But sitting on the couch in that living room, surrounded by pieces of our life arranged in this secret place, I finally understood what David had been trying to protect me from. 3 days later, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer the unfamiliar number, but something made me accept the call. "Mrs. Margaret Thompson?" The voice was formal but kind. "My name is Thomas Mitchell. I was your husband's accountant." Mr. Mitchell explained that David had left specific instructions. He was only to contact me if circumstances changed, if anything didn't feel right with the family. After I confirmed that things had indeed changed, he asked me to meet him at his office. The next day, I sat across from Mr. Mitchell in his modest office above a bakery in South Asheville. He was older than I'd expected, with kind eyes behind simple glasses. He pulled out a slim black folder and said, "Your husband was a very smart man and a careful one. He always had a backup plan. 5 years ago, David had quietly moved a portion of his retirement savings into a separate trust in my name, only completely private, unlisted on any family portfolio." The folder contained documents showing over $650,000, conservatively managed and untouched since he'd established it. "He called it the just-in-case fund," Mr. Mitchell explained. "If anything ever happened to him and you felt pressured or shut out, you'd have your own footing." But there was more. Mr. Mitchell showed me a history of financial requests from Robert over the past decade. First in 2014, when David had given him $25,000 as a gift for a home remodeling business. Then in 2016, Robert had asked for $75,000 more. David had said no. Again in 2019, another request for Jessica's house flipping dreams. David had refused again. The most disturbing revelation was a copied check from 2018, a $15,000 withdrawal from our joint account, supposedly signed by me for house updates. The signature was close but not exact. I'd never written that check. The money had gone to a contractor in Tennessee for a rental property Jessica was managing. David confronted them quietly, Mr. Mitchell explained. Jessica denied it. Robert said it must have been a mistake. But after that day, David started separating more assets. The truth hit me like a physical blow. They hadn't been waiting for me to need help, they'd been waiting for me to get out of the way. David's exact words, according to Mr. Mitchell, were, "They're not planning for her future. They're planning around it." There was even more money coming, another $82,000 from a business account David had maintained, to be transferred once this meeting occurred. By the time I left Mr. Mitchell's office, I had over $700,000 in my name alone, money that Robert and Jessica had no idea existed. That evening, they appeared at my house. I saw Robert's car parked across the street, engine running, Jessica waiting in the passenger seat while he approached my door. His greeting was stiff, uncomfortable. "We need to talk," he said. He started with a half-hearted apology about Christmas, claiming things had gotten busy, and they hadn't wanted to hurt anyone's feelings. Then he got to the real reason for his visit. "Actually, I wanted to ask you something about Dad's stuff, the old accounts. I've been going through files he left in the garage, and I thought maybe if you needed help sorting anything financial stuff, paperwork, I could help." The audacity was breathtaking. "What made you think I needed help?" I asked. He blinked, clearly not expecting the question. "Well, you've been quiet and we've been worried. You haven't called in 3 weeks." "I know, but things have been hectic. Jessica's been trying to get the business going, and we're looking at refinancing the house." "You mean the rental house in Tennessee?" He froze. The color drained from his face as he realized I knew about their secret investment. "How did you?" "Don't worry about how," I interrupted. "Just answer me one thing. Did you know she forged my name on that check?" He looked away, which was answer enough. I stepped back and opened the door wider, not to invite him in, but to make my words clear. "You weren't checking in on me. You were checking on what I have." "Mom, no. Don't interrupt." He closed his mouth. "I know about the trust. I know about the accounts Dad moved. I know about the requests you made, the ones he turned down." He looked like a child caught stealing, except this time it wasn't cookies from the jar, it was my future. "You think I don't know when someone's being nice just to see what they can get?" He stepped forward. "It's not like that. We were just trying to make sure things are manageable." "For who?" When he couldn't answer, I looked past him toward the car where Jessica still sat, unwilling to face me herself. "She's probably worried you'll say too much," I observed. "Mom, you're overthinking this." "No," I said firmly. "I'm finally thinking clearly." I told him to go home and give Jessica my regards. He started to argue but thought better of it. Without another word, he returned to his car, and they drove away. 2 mornings later, Carol Stevens called with disturbing news. She'd heard through the community grapevine that Jessica was telling people I was showing signs of confusion, that I was isolating myself and might need someone to step in legally. She was building a case to challenge my ability to manage my own affairs. Carol came over that afternoon with her laptop and a binder full of legal templates. "We're going to put this in writing," she declared. "No more games, no more waiting." We drafted a formal letter outlining that I was of sound mind, managing my personal affairs, and fully capable of making legal decisions. We included notice that I'd be retaining counsel, and that any attempt to challenge my capacity would be met with full legal resistance. I added one line in my own handwriting. "I am not confused. I am not unstable. I am simply done being treated like an afterthought." We sent the letter certified mail to both Robert and Jessica. "There," Carol said, leaning back in her chair. "They can't say they weren't warned." That night, I wrote my own list, not of things to cook or clean or organize, but things I wanted to do for myself. Take a day trip to Charleston. Paint the back room at the farmhouse. Start a flower garden this spring. Nothing edible, just beauty for its own sake. Write David a letter. Simple things, but each one felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd lost. A week later, Mr. Mitchell appeared at my door with a small cardboard box, my name written on top in David's handwriting. "This needed to be handed over in person," he explained. "David gave me this the week before he passed, with instructions not to deliver it until I was sure you were ready. You're ready." Inside was a leather-bound journal David had filled with entries from his final year. He'd been documenting everything: his observations about Robert's growing distance, Jessica's influence, my gradual transformation from someone central to their lives to someone they tolerated. He'd seen it all, felt it all, and instead of saying something that might have torn the family apart prematurely, he'd planned for this moment. The entries revealed his deepest fears, not of dying, but of what would happen to me afterward. Margaret is the strongest person I know, he wrote. But strong people get tired too. And when she's tired, she won't ask for help. She'll just smile and keep serving everyone else until there's nothing left for herself. Page after page, he'd poured out everything he'd observed but never said. He talked about our late-night conversations, the way I used to hum while folding laundry, how Robert used to run into my arms after school, and how gradually that loving child had disappeared. David hadn't just seen the changes, he'd mourned them alongside me. One entry stopped me cold. If you ever find yourself sitting at our table alone, wearing that red dress, waiting for someone who doesn't show, know that I saw it coming, and it has nothing to do with you. They left, but you are still here, and you are still enough. Near the end of the journal, I discovered another surprise. David had established a foundation called the Margaret J. Thompson Fund for Independent Women. It's meant for women like Margaret, he wrote. Widows, grandmothers, caretakers who've spent a lifetime giving and one day realize they've been left behind. The final page contained his shaky but careful handwriting. If they choose to walk out of your life, let them. What's meant to stay stays. What's meant to love you will. I held that journal against my chest and cried, not the kind of tears that break you, but the kind that clean you out and make room for what comes next. David had answered every prayer I'd never said aloud. Not with grand gestures or dramatic speeches, but with steady love, careful planning, and unwavering truth. 1 year later, everything feels different. I wake up Christmas morning in the farmhouse, and there's a peace in the air that comes from knowing rather than hoping. Carol's already in the kitchen, banging around pots like she owns the place, and I don't mind one bit. This year I invited people who actually show up. Women from the Senior Center's Quilting Club. A young man who runs the art program at church, and some of the kids he mentors. When I told them I was hosting dinner, they didn't hesitate. We'll be there, they said, and they meant it. At 3 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rings and keeps ringing. Voices fill the house. Coats are hung, hats tossed in the basket by the stairs. A little boy named Marcus runs straight to the tree, pointing at the candy canes. You got real ones, he shouts, and I laugh. Only way to do it. Within 30 minutes, my house is alive. Every chair is filled. The table is loud and bright and overflowing with food. Carol fusses over the gravy while Ruth from the Quilting Club tells stories about her high school sweetheart. Someone puts on music, and Bing Crosby hums in the background. It's not perfect. Someone spills juice on the tablecloth. The ham is slightly overcooked, and one of the teenagers accidentally knocks over a vase. But I've never felt more complete. The tree is decorated with handmade ornaments from the children, cotton ball snowmen, and crayon-colored paper stars. Not store-bought, but real. 3 days before Christmas, I'd received a card from Robert. No return address, just a cream envelope with his handwriting. Inside, Merry Christmas, Mom. Hope you're doing well. Robert and Jessica. No apology, no mention of last year, no invitation to anything. Just a card. I didn't cry or crumble. I simply placed it in a drawer because this year wasn't about them. After dinner, the kids go outside with the sidewalk chalk we handed out as gifts. The adults sip coffee and share leftover pie. Someone starts singing Silent Night, and others join in. I slip out to the porch with a glass of wine, watching the sky streak with soft pink and gold. Behind me, Carol laughs loudly at something, her voice carrying through the open window. I hear her shout, "You better not be sneaking another roll, Marcus." I smile and sit in David's old rocker, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. I think about David and know he would have loved this, not just the food or music, but the way the house feels alive and honest. He always said, "You don't need blood to build a family. You need heart." He was right. Looking back through the window at the table full of different faces and names, I realize this is the dinner that mattered. Not the one I waited for last year, not the one that left me with cold plates and silence. This table, these people who chose to be here, who value what I offer, who see me as more than an obligation or an inconvenience. Last year, I invited my son and his wife to Christmas dinner. They chose another table, so I built a new one. Now this table is where I belong. Let them send cards from a distance. Let them whisper and plan and watch. I'm not angry anymore, not bitter. I'm simply full of purpose, full of genuine relationships, full of the life I've chosen to create rather than the one I kept hoping others would give me. This world has enough people waiting to be chosen. I decided to stop waiting and start choosing people who choose me back, choosing love that doesn't come with conditions, choosing a life that honors who I am rather than who others think I should be. And if you've found yourself waiting too long for someone else to see your worth, maybe it's time to stop waiting and start building something beautiful with the people who already know how precious you are. Thanks for letting me share this story with you. If it resonated with you, I'd love for you to subscribe and share your own experiences in the comments below.